Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. Khalil Gibran continues by saying the most massive characters are shared with their scars. Today is the 76th anniversary of the Nakba. The Nakba has been happening since 1948, especially in Gaza, where over 2 million people in occupied Gaza are still struggling to survive after 6 months of Israeli bombing, tank shelling, and demolishing houses, demolishing institutions, community buildings and hospitals, destroying clinics, worshipping places and universities. I don't think the people of Gaza will survive from imposed sanctions on them, and thus having famine if the situation continues as it is. There is no nation, community, or individuals without passing through conflict, suffering, stress, or trauma. Suffering is very essential for our growth because it is the driving force for change via resistance and vitality. Our resistance is essential to change the situation, and no change without struggling, sacrificing, and suffering. Change is not a mechanical or automatic process. It is a life story full of traumas, perseverance, struggle, and resistance. As Palestinians, we have 4 kinds of traumas at least. First, the collective one of 1948, in which 600 villages were leveled and more than 750,000 people were kicked out from their villages in historic Palestine. Most of those people moved forcefully to live in refugee camps inside the land and in diaspora. Currently, there are 59 refugee camps around the world, precisely in the Middle East. The population of the Palestinian people is now almost 14 million. Half of them are refugees who dream of returning to their homes. Collective trauma is now as a result in what is happening in Gaza as genocide, famine, and all human rights violation unfold. The trauma has been more painful and severe in the light of the international state's complicity. The second type of trauma is intergenerational, that passes from one generation to another. I remember my mother, may God bless her heart, told me about the time under the Ottoman occupation, in which people were living in terrible oppressive situations, with famine taking its toll, unable to find food except scavenging in the dung of the animals. This is the situation where our ancestors used to live in oppression and tyranny. Thirdly, the family trauma has almost visited or resided in every house because of the Israeli occupation, where through imprisonment, assassination, land confiscation, house demolishing, and deportation among the long list of human rights violations. The fourth type of trauma is the individual one, in which many individuals, because of the deteriorating socioeconomic and political conditions, live in traumas. Such individual trauma needs psychosocial counseling. To be more frank with you, not all of the personal trauma is related to the occupation, but could be as a collateral damage. Yes, indeed, we need to deal with all these kinds of traumas. Norman Finkelstein said, historically, conquest regimes have pursued one or a combination of 4 options: extermination, enslavement, expulsion, and encirclement. Despite all barbaric actions, massive killings, horrific injuries, and genocide, the Israeli government has not been able to wipe out the Palestinian society. Martin Luther King's words still stand tall. Human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertions and passionate concern of the dedicated individuals. Indeed, such words of Martin Luther King is the recipe for success. After all, what are the aspects of coexistence? The future of interfaith, dialogue of civilization, status of human rights, the international humanitarian law, and generally human rights. What has been happening for the last 76 years in general and since October 7 in particular, 2023 in particular, is a recipe for culture of hate, racism, xenophobia, apartheid, and calls for revenge, violence, and terrorism. Unless we are able to break the cycle of violence through rendering rights, restoring justice, apology for the crimes, forgiveness and compensation, thus bringing healing. This will not happen unless we work diligently for a culture of acceptance. If we follow that and we walk the talk of trauma healing, we'll preserve dignity of people, respect all of human rights, and thus will have trauma healing. The wound is the place where the light enters you, as Rumi said. What is needed now more than any time and any else? To halt all attacks, shelling and bombing, to have a ceasefire immediately that leads to everlasting truce, to embark on the peace process, the implementation of UN resolutions, and have an international conference to deal with the issue based on justice, and to enhance arms dialogue to replace dialogue of arms once and for all. The withdrawal of Israeli troops from all the occupied territories, exchange of prisoners, confidence-building measures, reparation and compensation, and thus we can all assume collective responsibility.